let's be honest, navigating the business world can feel like you're lost in a fog, right? Every project, every new idea feels like a step into the unknown. But what if you had a map? What if you had a clear, structured playbook that took you from total confusion to absolute clarity? Well, that is exactly what we are going to build today. So, let's get right into it.
I want you to think about this for a second. We've all been there. I've been there, you've been there. You have this brilliant idea. The kickoff meeting is electric, everyone's excited, and then, a few months down the line, it just fizzles. It misses the mark, or just disappears completely. Why does this happen over and over again?
And here's the thing, it's almost never about the idea being bad. The problem is the process, or more like the complete lack of one. It's like trying to win a Super Bowl without a playbook. You just have a bunch of talented people running around randomly. And that, my friends, is a recipe for chaos.
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to build that playbook together. First, I'll introduce the playbook itself. Then, we'll dive into the first half, how to see things clearly. After that, we'll get into the second half, how to act decisively. And finally, we'll talk about the operating system that makes the whole thing run smoothly.
So let's get to it. How do we fight back against that strategic chaos we were just talking about? The answer is a logical sequence. It's a framework we're calling SPSE, and it's designed to be your North Star through pretty much any business challenge you can think of.
So what in the world does SPSE actually stand for? Well, it maps out a 4-phase journey that is incredibly logical. The first S is for strategy and setup. That's where you get the lay of the land, the big picture. P is for problem and plan, where you really zero in on the specific issue you're trying to solve. The next S is for solution and selection. Okay, now what are we going to do about it? And finally, E is for execution and evaluation. This is where you actually do the thing and check if it worked. See, each phase builds perfectly on the last one. It really is a journey from chaos to control.
All right, let's start with the first half of the playbook. This covers those first 2 phases, and it's all about one thing: getting crystal clear on what's going on. You wouldn't rearrange all the furniture in a dark room, right? This is about flicking on the lights first.
So in phase 1, strategy and setup, we're pulling way back to get that 30,000-foot view. We use a few key tools here. There's PESTL analysis, which is a mouthful, I know. It helps you understand all those big external forces like political, economic, and social trends. Then you've got your classic SWOT analysis for your internal strengths and weaknesses versus external opportunities and threats. And so important, stakeholder analysis, because at the end of the day, business is always about people.
I absolutely love this way of thinking about a SWOT analysis. It's like you're literally drawing the line in the sand. On your side of the line, you've got the stuff you can actually control, your strengths and your weaknesses. On the other side, that's the outside world, the opportunities and threats you can't control, but you have to react to. Getting this one simple distinction right is a total game changer.
Okay, once you've mapped the landscape, phase 2 is all about zooming in on the real problem. You've got root cause analysis, where you put on your detective hat and dig past the symptoms to find the real culprit. Then there's this really cool technique called 6 thinking hats. It's an amazing way to stop meetings from descending into chaos by having everyone look at the problem from the same angle at the same time. And of course, gap analysis, which is just a powerfully simple way of asking, where are we now, where do we want to be, and how big is that gap?
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? We've all been on those teams that are just constantly in firefighting mode. It is exhausting. The whole point of this problem-finding phase is to stop, take a breath, and ask, hey, why do these fires keep starting in the first place? Then you can go and fireproof the whole system.
All right, so we've done our homework. We can see the situation clearly. We've defined the problem with precision. Now what? Well, now it's time for the second half of the playbook, acting decisively. This is where we make smart choices and, more importantly, we take action.
Now we're in phase 3, the decision-making hub. You know how it is. You've got a couple of good potential solutions on the table. How do you pick the right one without it just being about who argues the loudest? Well, you use tools. A force field analysis helps you weigh all the forces for and against a change. And a decision matrix is fantastic for taking emotion out of the equation and using weighted criteria to let the most logical path just reveal itself.
This is such a perfect way to visualize force field analysis. Any new initiative, any change is literally a tug of war. On one side, you have the driving forces, pushing you forward. On the other, the restraining forces, pulling you back to how things are now. And here's the secret sauce. Sometimes the smartest move isn't just to pull harder,
It's to find a way to weaken the other team's grip.
And now, we execute. Phase 4 is where the rubber meets the road. We use Moscow analysis for some ruthless prioritization. It stands for must-have, should-have, could-have, and won't-have. It forces you to be brutally honest about what's essential. Then you have your work breakdown structure and Gantt chart to create a detailed project blueprint and timeline. And finally, risk analysis, so you can turn potential chaos into proactive control by thinking ahead.
Now, it's so important to get how these two tools work together. The work breakdown structure, or WBS, is the what. It is the complete checklist of every single task that needs to get done. It's the project's blueprint. The Gantt chart is the when. It takes that entire checklist and puts it on a timeline. One is the blueprint, the other is the assembly line. You absolutely need both.
Okay, so we've got our playbook full of individual techniques. But what about the system that runs the entire game? That brings us to our final piece, the operating system. The big picture frameworks that manage everything.
Let's go back to our sports analogy. All those tools we just talked about, SWOT, Gantt, Moscow, they're like your individual plays. But a great team doesn't just run random plays. They run them within a larger system, an offensive or defensive scheme. That's exactly what these execution frameworks are. They're the system that runs the entire game.
And this is a super healthy breakdown. You've got the Balanced Scorecard for high-level strategy, turning a big vision into balanced action. Then you have OKRs, which are all about driving strategic execution with ambitious, measurable goals. Next is DMEIC, a deep, data-driven cycle for improving complex processes. And finally, the A3 report, which is just this brilliant tool for structured problem-solving that fits on one page. You don't use all of them, you pick the right framework for the game you're playing.
And this quote just brings us full circle, right back to where we started. Remember that huge gap between a brilliant idea and a brilliant result? That's the execution gap. Frameworks like OKRs and DMAIC, they are designed specifically to build a bridge across that gap, to make sure great strategies actually become great outcomes.
So in the end, a strategy isn't just some boring document. It's a story. And this SPSE framework, it gives you the structure, the chapters, the plot points you need to write a story of success instead of failure. So the only real question left is, are you going to be the one to write it, or are you just going to let chaos write it for you?